The Exorcist, Belieber is a 2023 horror film directed by David Gordon Green and the sixth film in the Exorcist franchise. I was looking forward to this because Green directed the recent Halloween revival, and I really liked those first two movies. The third one wasn't that good, but those first two, class. This Exorcist movie is also a revival, with it being a direct sequel to the 1973 original, completely negating the movies that came after. So there's this photographer, Victor Fielding, who takes a trip to Haiti with his pregnant wife. There's an earthquake that kills her, but the baby survives. 13 years later, he's raising his daughter as a single father in Georgia. One night, his daughter and her friend run off into the woods to perform a seance to contact her dead mother, and then the girls disappear. They're discovered 3 days later in a barn, believing that only a few hours have passed. This opening is so strong. At the beginning, you have all these parents and the police running around trying to find the girls, and there's this really intense mystery. And then when the girls come back, you get this supernatural mystery about what happened to them in those missing days. Then when more of the supernatural stuff and the possession starts to take over, it gets really scary. There are these shots that just linger on the same space, and there's these spots where something could jump out or appear, and sometimes nothing does. You never know, and it really keeps the tension up. This first third of the movie, I was like, holy shit, this is fucking awesome, I love it. Then the movie shits the bed. So in researching the possession, the dad comes across the case of Regan from the first movie and goes out to find her mother, Chris, played by Ellen Burstyn. Now, I've seen Burstyn do great things in a lot of films, but here she's like 100 years old and she is not good in this. Her acting comes off as so corny and forced, and it's comical but not in an intentional way, and this whole part with her just screeches the movie to a halt. Then the last third is the exorcism, which is just, oh, every religion is right! And the two girls are tied to chairs in a circle and they're yelling at the adults for about 30 minutes. I seriously didn't care, it wasn't scary, and I didn't give a shit anymore. I don't get why they had to have such a hard connection to the first movie. It made sense for the Halloween revivals because those movies were about Michael Myers. The original Exorcist had more to do with ideas of family and faith, more than it had to do with the actual demon that possessed Regan. So they could have just had a possession anywhere being the thing that puts pressure on these themes. It didn't have to be connected at all to the original. I guess you paid money for the name, so you have to have some references, but not to this extent. No one who is a hardcore fan of the original would even care that this carried on the story from the first one, and no one getting into the series now would care either. They're just gonna be confused by this goofy old woman. And a lot of what made the performances good in the first one was that the director, William Friedkin, was an insane person, and he would do things like randomly fire off guns to scare the cast, or for Ellen Burstyn, had her pulled by a wire so hard that she injured her back. So I don't know, maybe Green should have just slapped her around a little bit. And I know there's been so many exorcism movies since the 1973 original, so it's hard to make something that distinguishes itself, but that's your job. You're supposed to make a movie that I give a shit about, and you failed. This is supposed to be the first in a trilogy, but because it did so badly, Green said he might not even come back to direct the next ones, so we'll see. I wouldn't be surprised if they just scrapped the whole thing. This isn't the worst horror movie I've ever seen, but it's just such a huge letdown after that amazing first act. It's not a recommend. I'd have to give The Exorcist Belieber a 1.5 out of 5.